They were found on a quiet South Carolina road, faceless to the world, a boy and a girl who seemed to vanish from the records of time. For decades they were just the unknowns. But every story has a beginning. And the truth always leaves a trail. August 9, 1976. A dusty dirt road just outside of Sumter, South Carolina. The kind of road no one takes unless they have to. Quiet. Isolated. Forgotten. A place where secrets don't whisper, they scream in silence. That morning, a trucker running behind schedule pulled off the highway to rest. What he found instead was a horror that would haunt Sumter County for nearly half a century. 2 bodies. A young man and woman. Lying just off the road, side by side. No IDs. No car. No witnesses. Nothing but the smell of blood and Carolina pine. They had been murdered. Execution style. The girl shot once through the back. The boy, twice. No signs of a struggle. No robbery. Just death delivered with eerie precision. Sheriff's deputies closed off the area. The coroner marked time of death as sometime after midnight. No tire tracks. No footprints. Just 2 lives erased in the shadows of an empty road. The boy wore a gold Bulova watch and a shirt with Coors America's Fine Light beer. The girl had painted nails and fine dental work. They weren't vagrants. They were clean, healthy, young. Some said they looked like tourists. Others runaways. Or maybe lovers fleeing something. But they weren't from here. And no one claimed them. The local press called them John and Jane Doe. But behind those placeholder names were real people. Someone's daughter. Someone's son. Someone who had vanished, without a trace. Sketches were drawn. Bulletins posted. But the calls never came. It was as if these 2 kids had dropped out of the sky, into the hands of a killer who vanished just as quickly. Years turned to decades. The world changed. Presidents came and went. But the case sat there, buried in a cabinet marked Unsolved. Their names, forgotten. Their stories silenced. But stories have a way of coming back. And sometimes, the dead refuse to stay quiet. This is the story of 2 strangers who died together, and were lost to time. A mystery that would take 45 years to crack. A case born before the internet, that would one day be solved by it. This is a story of love, lies, disappearance, and cold-blooded murder. But before we can tell you who they were, you need to know what they became. They were found, on a summer morning, alone, face down, dead. But that's not where the story begins. And it's far, far from where it ends. What really happened that night in 1976? Who were they running from, or running toward? And what kind of monster leaves behind 2 bodies? And not a single clue? In the weeks that followed, investigators did what they always do when confronted with the unknown. They started with the bodies. But there were no names. No driver's licenses. No wallets. No fingerprints on record. No parents calling from out of state asking, "Have you seen my daughter?" It was as if these 2 young people never existed at all. They became known by another name. The Sumter County Does. Jane Doe. John Doe. 2 puzzle pieces. With no picture to match. The coroner noted no tattoos. Clean hands. Perfect teeth. A white girl. Maybe 18 to 22. Slender. Delicate features. A white male. Athletic. Taller. Late teens or early 20s. Both shot in the head with a .357 Magnum revolver. No defensive wounds. They didn't fight. They didn't see it coming. They were dressed too well to be hitchhikers. And yet, they had no vehicle. No bags. No trail. The scene was cold. Too clean. Like someone knew what they were doing, and didn't want them found. Sketches were published. Thousands of flyers sent across the country. The FBI got involved. Dental records circulated. Still, no hits. No matches. The bodies were embalmed. Preserved. For months, then years they remained in cold storage, waiting for a name. In 1977 they were buried. Side by side. Unmarked for years. Just a boy and a girl in a cemetery full of names, except theirs. The town talked, of course. You don't find 2 strangers dead in the woods without the rumors following. Were they spies? Lovers on the run? Victims of a drug deal? Or simply 2 kids in the wrong place, at the wrong time? One theory said they were brother and sister. Another claimed they were part of a cult. A third pointed to motorcycle gangs. But every theory had one thing in common. None of them stuck. Detectives scoured the southeast. Phone calls to Pennsylvania, Colorado, Florida. Tips poured in. Hundreds. But every name they checked led to someone else. Every path they walked ended in dust. In time, Even the most determined began to lose hope. The leads dried up, the theories faded, and the names never came. But the eyes of the two young victims remained, in sketches, in morgue photos, in the minds of a few detectives who swore they'd never stop looking. Who were they? Where did they come from? And why did no one ever come looking for them? What the killer never expected, what no one could have imagined in 1976, was that technology would one day reach further than any detective could. That DNA could outlive bullets. That the internet could resurrect ghosts. That strangers online would care more than the world once did. It would take 45 years. But the dead would speak again. In every unsolved crime there comes a moment when the facts go quiet, when evidence stops speaking, and all that's left is theory. By the late 1970s, the investigation into the Sumter County Does had stalled. No suspects, no missing persons match, no motive, only speculation and obsession. Detective James Fields was one of the first to call it what it was: a ghost case. He followed every sliver of light. The boy's watch, expensive, traceable, but no store remembered selling it. The girl's dental work, meticulous, costly. Surely someone out there had records. But no dentist stepped forward. Theories flooded in like a storm with no end. Were they runaways from an abusive home? Were they part of a love triangle turned deadly? Or were they couriers for something far darker? There was talk of drug trafficking, a Florida connection, even whispers of a military link. One of the bullets was consistent with a .357 Magnum, a weapon favored by law enforcement and professionals. But the killer had left no shells at the scene, no fingerprints, no fibers, nothing. As the years passed, obsession replaced optimism. Detective Fields kept their sketches on his wall, even after retirement, even as his hands began to tremble, even after everyone else forgot. He called them the kids. He said they looked like they just wanted to be free. Some believed the couple were hitchhiking through the South. 1976 was a different America, a place where kids with backpacks caught rides with strangers and never came back. The open road was freedom and danger, and sometimes those two things met. One tip led detectives to a campground in Georgia. Another pointed to a commune outside Asheville. A third said the girl looked like someone from a missing persons report in Nebraska. All dead ends. Every last one. As the case faded from headlines, it stayed alive in whispers. Locals told stories in bars and barbershops. Parents warned their daughters about strangers. And somewhere out there, a killer was still walking free. In the 1990s, as technology crept forward, the sketches were redrawn. The bodies exhumed. Facial reconstructions attempted. But every time hope swelled, it vanished into silence again. And then something happened that no detective in 1976 could have predicted. The case was no longer just local. It was global. People who had never heard of Sumter County would soon know every detail, because the internet was coming. And with it, an army of strangers who refused to let the dead be forgotten. Sometimes, answers don't come from inside the case file. Sometimes, they come from outside the system entirely. From people with no badge, no training. Just a connection they can't explain. The case was cold. Frostbitten by time. Frozen by the limits of technology. But time has a funny way of giving back what it once stole. In the early 2000s, a new kind of detective emerged. No badge. No gun. No training. Just a keyboard and curiosity. They called themselves web sleuths. Anonymous names. Real obsession. Working day jobs, raising kids, and spending their nights buried in cold cases. They were teachers, nurses, programmers, retirees. But they shared one thing. They wanted to know who the Sumter County Does really were. New technology brought new faces. With facial reconstruction software, the Jane and John Doe of 1976 were reborn, digitally. The girl's high cheekbones, the boy's strong jawline, now rendered in color, lifelike, and haunting. Clues that once led nowhere were re-examined under new light. The coarse t-shirt, was it sold only in Colorado? The watch, was it a graduation gift? The dental work, who could afford it in the 70s? People across the world began comparing missing persons photos. Every eye shape, every scar, every smile, scrutinized. They mapped hitchhiking routes, compared crime timelines, even wrote to families who had lost someone decades before. Obsession grew, not out of fear, but empathy. There was something about this couple, the way they were found, the silence that followed. It hurt. Soon people weren't just asking, who killed them? They were asking, who were they when they were alive. The case moved from backrooms to living rooms, from dusty shelves to digital feeds. The unknown boy and girl from a ditch in South Carolina. They were now on phones, on laptops, on podcasts with millions of downloads. They were no longer just Does. They had voices, advocates, followers, and then DNA. The one thing time couldn't erase. For decades, it sat frozen in evidence boxes. Hair, tissue, bone fragments. It waited for a world that could read it. In the late 2010s, genetic genealogy, once reserved for ancestry tests, became a weapon in the fight against silence. When detectives cracked a serial killer with nothing but family trees and a genetic trace, the world realized, the dead can speak. The Sumter County Does were exhumed. Again. DNA extracted, uploaded, matched against public genealogy databases. Not for a suspect, but for family, for home. And then, in early 2021, a name appeared. Not a theory, not a sketch, a real name. Pamela Mae Buckley, born in Minnesota, vanished in 1975. James Paul Freund, from Pennsylvania, never heard from again. After 45 years, the Jane and John Doe of Sumter County had names. But a name is not an answer, because knowing who they were only made the question louder. Why were they killed? And who pulled the trigger? For decades they were names without faces, then faces without names. And finally, Pamela Mae Buckley and James Paul Freund, identified after 45 years. But DNA can only tell you so much. It tells you who, sometimes where, but never why. Pamela was 25 years old, a Midwestern girl with freckles and dreams she never told anyone about. James was 30, a college dropout with a kind face and too many half-finished plans. They left behind no letters, no goodbyes, no clear trail, only fragments, only guesses. Their bodies were discovered off a quiet country road in Sumter County, South Carolina. Each shot in the back, execution style. No signs of robbery, no signs of struggle. The girl still wore her jewelry, the boy his expensive watch. Who kills like that? And why? Once names surfaced, theories rushed back in. Only now, they had new meaning. Were they victims of a random drifter? Were they targeted? Or were they running from someone? Some say Pamela and James left Florida together. Others believe they were hitchhiking across the Southeast, drawn together by rebellion or love or fear. But where they were going, no one knows. And what they were running from, if anything, died with them. Detectives were sure of one thing. It wasn't an accident. Someone wanted them gone. Permanently. The execution-style killing suggested a professional hand. Or someone filled with rage. Someone who didn't hesitate. Some believed it was a serial killer. Others suspected drugs. A hitchhiker deal gone wrong. A stolen car. A jealous ex. But none of those theories ever stuck. There were no witnesses. No murder weapon. No confession. Just an anonymous grave. And 2 lives cut short. Detective Michael Turner, one of the last to inherit the case, put it bluntly. You get their names, and you think you'll finally find the killer. But it's like digging up a tree and finding only roots. No branches. Nowhere to climb. Even with names carved in stone, justice remains a whisper. The killer, whoever they were, had nearly half a century to vanish. Into the woods. Into another state. Into death itself. The world kept moving. But something stayed there. In the dirt. In the silence. In the unasked question. Did someone get away with murder? Or worse, is the truth still out there just one whisper away? Some people die and disappear. Others become something else. They don't leave. They linger. Pamela Buckley. James Freund. They became more than names, more than a case file. They became the voices in 1,000 minds. The dreams of detectives who never knew them. The faces haunting message boards at 3 a.m. They've been seen by millions. And yet no one alive can say who they were in their final days. But they've been heard. Through the questions they left behind. Through the silence that screams louder with time. There are those who believe the dead speak. Not with voices, but with patterns. Coincidences. Instinct. Pamela. She's been dreamt about. James. Seen in flickers at the side of the road, by those who didn't know the story until later. In Sumter County, the old-timers still talk about it. The couple found in '76. Kids who looked like they had someplace better to be. When you die nameless, the world forgets you faster. When you're found in a ditch, people don't assume you mattered. But when strangers name you, when the internet fights for you, when a detective refuses to close your file, You become something else. A ghost maybe. Or a symbol. Or a mirror. Pamela and James never spoke again. But they made thousands speak in their place. The kid in Minnesota who launched a doe blog. The mother who searched because she lost a child once. The genealogist who traced every cousin until the tree stopped whispering. Maybe ghosts are just stories with no endings. Maybe that's what they are now. Stories, awaiting to close. They've been silent since 1976. But silence is not absence. Silence is memory. Silence is what remains. When a scream is never answered. We know the place. We know the victims. We know the day. But we do not know the killer. So we return to the chamber. Not the courtroom. The echo chamber. Where theories go to live. And sometimes, to rot. No wallets. No vehicle. No identification. Just two bodies, well-dressed, well-groomed, and very deliberately discarded. Witnesses remember a man seen near the roadside that summer. Tall. Caucasian. Driving a Dodge van, maybe green. But time erases faces. Memories shift. Descriptions blur. Some believe the killer was a drifter. A serial predator moving across southern highways. Others point to someone closer. A fellow traveler. A friend turned threat. Pamela had been missing from Colorado. James from Pennsylvania. But how did they meet? And more importantly, who did they trust enough to follow that far south? They were seen in Florida. Maybe hitchhiking. Maybe running. Was it a ride gone wrong? Was there a third person in the car? In 1976, several double homicides occurred along rural roads from Georgia to North Carolina. Victims shot in the back. Minimal theft. Maximum silence. Was there a pattern? Are we seeing ghosts where there are none? Some officers believe the couple knew their killer. That the positioning of the bodies, James shielding Pamela, suggests hesitation. An emotional execution. Others argue. It was cold. Methodical. Someone who'd done it before. The weapon was a .357 Magnum. High caliber. Loud. Heavy. Not the kind of gun someone carries by accident. But here is the question that lingers. Who brings a weapon like that? Unless they already knew what they were going to do? Over the years, suspects emerged. None confirmed. One man confessed, only to recant. A dead end. Or a cover-up. Every cold case becomes a hall of mirrors. You don't just find suspects. You find shadows. But memories without evidence are ghosts too. And the justice system does not prosecute ghosts. We have no fingerprints. No murder weapon. No motive. Just silence. And two names carved into a gravestone. Pamela and James were found together. They died together. And for almost 50 years they were unknown. Together. Now they are known. But their killer remains a shadow behind the trees. In some stories, justice never arrives. Only the echo does. Long after the chamber falls silent. Every story wants an ending. A neat bow. A final chapter. Justice served. Truth revealed. But some stories don't get that. They remain unfinished, like footsteps fading into the distance. Pamela and James, young, hopeful, vanished, left a story no one could finish. Their names gave them life again. Their faces gave them back their dignity. But the why, and the who, remain locked away, whispering between the lines. Some truths live in shadows. Some questions never find answers. Some killers walk free. But memory is its own kind of justice. A light in the dark. As long as we remember, Pamela and James are not forgotten. The ending no one writes is still a story worth telling. Do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share.